one. Let's just talk about some logistics here. This is my second to last class, so we'll do this class obviously, and then we'll have one more after that next Sunday, and then Brother Jim Sullivan has some things for us, and we'll talk about that later. But I'm the guy for the next 2 weeks. Great to see you again. When we left off, we had been talking about the impending civil war between David, who was king down in Hebron, and Ishbosheth, who was Saul's son, one of the sons of Saul that survived the chaos and the carnage of Mount Gilboa. And, he has complete control now of really the northern tribes. And we'll take a look at that. David is in Ziklag. If you remember, that was his base of operations down in the south in the Negev. That was actually destroyed by the Amalekites when he was away with the Philistines, kind of playing political games with the Philistines. Was he going to be with the Philistines? Was he not going to be? And so while he was doing all this, he left his city exposed. And the Amalekites, as we know, I think this 31st chapter of 1 Samuel, came up and took everything. It was a raiding party, and they took away all of the goods and the wealth that was in Ziklag, which I would imagine was considerable. David, this was really a very low point of David, right? It says that the people spoke of stoning him because they were so distressed. And there's one great little line in there that I think we should remember this, that in David's distress and in his sadness, he did one thing. It says that David strengthened himself in the Lord. And I think that comes out in the Psalms as well. David is always strengthening himself. The Psalm that we read today, he's strengthening himself in God. He's remembering the power of God, that despite all of the oppression that he's going to, God is still there. And ultimately, David trusted in him. And he asked, through the Urim and the Thummim, shall I go? And God said, pursue, for thou shalt recover all. And he did. So it's a great story. And it should encourage us when we go through difficult times. David went through a lot of ups and downs in his life. And most assuredly, brothers and sisters, losing everything that you have, including your family, is rock bottom. But he overcame that, which is pretty incredible. All right. There's an Amalekite that actually brings the crown to David. Once again, the Amalekites are in the mix, right? And this is why, they loved war, they loved raiding, that type of thing. And this is one of the reasons why that God says, I am forever at war against Amalek. And it wasn't just because like a racial thing or had nothing to do with that. In fact, they were related to each other. The Hebrews and the Amalekites were related to each other. Jacob and Esau. Esau's descendants were the Amalekites. But, there was always this tension, and God didn't want those types of people near his people because they were vicious. They were always looking to fight. And the biggest thing was they attacked the weak. And that was really why God was so upset and angry at them, because as they were coming out of Egypt, the Amalekites attacked the old and the infirmed and the weak and the people that couldn't keep up, the children, and they took all of them away. Yes, Brother Chris?
How God might look upon October 7th, okay, with the idea of the Amalekites and Hamas, how they came in and slaughtered very much the innocent.
Yep.
So
great point, Chris. And that's really, particularly with the Amalekites. But if you look at a lot of the history of the Middle East, particularly with the Muslim conquest of the Middle East, a lot of that stuff happened as well. There was, invasions, people were killed, taken captive as slaves, that type of thing over and over and over again. So anyways, yes. So David is going to execute the messenger for claiming to kill God's anointed. We know that the Amalekite lied about that. He didn't kill him. Saul took his own life by falling on his sword. The Amalekite obviously kind of scavenging around after the battle, stripping everybody of their armor, and that's what they were doing. Armor was very expensive, and if you can go and find armor, You know, imagine finding Saul's armor. Pretty good, right? Not only was it technologically advanced, they all had the best, weapons and the best armor. But think about it. You could offer that up to your God. You know what I'm saying? Like the armor of your enemy. Again, that's why they cut off his head and hung his body and all that kind of stuff. This is what you did in the Bronze Age and the early Iron Age, right? You let everyone know that you were victorious, and you degraded and debased your enemies. And that's exactly right. And after that war on Mount Gilboa, Israel was debased. They didn't have any power anymore, really, to fight the Philistines. Philistines were coming and going as they pleased. David was down in the south, so it was a very difficult time. I think it says that they all fled, like all of Israel fled, in the rocks and in the thickets, that type of thing, and in the caves. They were just completely afraid. No one could help them. Their king and the king's sons, all gone. Difficult time. And so you can understand why people were looking to David to be their leader, particularly down in the south in Judah. It's almost like, we're in a tough time, but thank goodness we have David. And David, I think, had some foresight in this, brothers and sisters, because when he was down in Ziklag, down in the south, and eventually in Hebron, he's going to take over Hebron and be king there, he keeps the communications with the elders of Judah open. In fact, he gives them gifts. Every time he went on a raiding party, what did he do? He brought a lot of the gifts and stuff like that. A lot of the booty he gave to the elders of Judah to kind of keep them on his good side. He's very smart politically. All the while, he was telling the Philistines that he was attacking the cities of Judah, which he wasn't. He was attacking down further south. So anyways, we have the famous words, obviously, how have the mighty fallen? We have David, mourning deeply for Saul and for Jonathan. He understood, on a personal level, but also on a national level. He was mourning for the suffering that Israel was going through at this time. They were scattered, right, as a sheep without a shepherd. Jesus is going to use that, right, when he sees all of the people following him, but they didn't have any food, and that's when he's going to feed the 5,000. And I think we talked about this last time. David is going to compose a public lament sung throughout Israel. And this is where, weep ye daughters of Israel, for Saul clothed you in scarlet. And I think we talked about this last time. That indicates that Israel was wealthy. They became wealthy through trade and through the good leadership of Saul for a small period of time anyways. They were kind of a ragtag, splintered group of tribes that oftentimes fought each other more than their enemies. But slowly but surely, through Saul first and then David, they're going to coalesce into one nation, the nation of Israel. But it's going to take a while. It's going to take a lot of different battles and fights to subdue all of these nations, particularly the Philistines. Philistines were probably their number one enemy. They couldn't, for a long period of time, they could not beat the Philistines just because of the technology that they had. They had a lot more, iron weapons, that type of thing. Chariots as well, right? So, and they came from different parts of the world too. So it was a giant, big upheaval during this time. All right, boom. All right, I like this map where we can see the Philistines along the coastline, right? So these are the kingdoms of David and Ishbosheth. Down in the south, you can see Hebron, Ziklag, Beersheba. This was the area where David kind of hung out mostly. You can see how close Gath is to the borders of Judah. As a reminder, Gath was like the New York City or Tokyo of its time. Massive metropolis. Okay, maybe had 60,000 people in and around here. Okay, and so that's huge for that period of time. And so this is where all of the raiders would come out too. The oppression from the Philistines would come from Gath. And in fact, who else came from Gath? Well, we know who came from Gath, right? Goliath. So up in the north, particularly in Benjamin, this is where we have, Saul's family still controlling this area. But as you can see, the Philistines with the arrows there are invading all of these areas. So they don't have strong borders. The Philistines are coming and going as they want, and very difficult time. But you can see that David starts out with a very small region of what is going to be Israel down in the south. And there's names that are all familiar with this, right? Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron. Look where Jerusalem is. It's like right on the border between Israel and Judah. That's interesting. David's down in Hebron for 7.5 years. He's going to move northward up to Jerusalem and make that his capital. And that makes sense. You want to move closer to kind of the middle of Israel, in order to, as far as communication and stuff like that. So I think that's pretty interesting. So David is going to be in Hebron. He's going to be in there 7.5 years as king. And very slowly, he's going to consolidate his power base, strengthen himself. It says that there was sore war, all right? So it was hard war. Most civil wars are hard, right? Brutal, violent. Some of the worst wars fought in history are civil wars. Okay? Just think about this country here, the Civil War that we had. 600,000 Americans are going to die. Up until the Vietnam War, all of the wars that we were in after the Civil War didn't reach 600,000. That just shows you how brutal the war was. Anyways, Civil War between the house of David. We have this great little story where Abner and Joab kind of meet right before, and they bring out the young men, they call themselves, kind of like, hey, I got 12 really good guys, you got 12 really good guys, and they all fought each other. And I think they ended up killing each other, like all 12 of them were gone, and then they had a big fight. Hold on. No. And so it also says that the house of David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. And so it's almost like, it's very interesting, brothers and sisters, that the house of Saul was still trying to hang on. Even after all the prophecies over all the things that had happened, the destruction of the Hebrews at Mount Gilboa, and here we go, they're still hanging on. It's very difficult to give up power once you have it. House of Saul wasn't going anywhere. Ishbosheth was still alive. We have a king. What are you talking about? Yeah, it's a downtime, but we'll get back there. Remember as well, brothers and sisters, that a civil war, this was also kind of a family feud as well, wasn't it? Because David was son-in-law to the king. So he was part of the family. He knew these guys intimately. You don't think that he knew Ishbosheth intimately? He knew him. He probably had conversations with them, hung out with them, had, maybe celebrated the Passover with him. So Ishbosheth is going to be assassinated. That's the other thing, too. Abner really was the power behind the throne, wasn't he? And once he changed sides, there was a big fight over one of Saul's concubines, right? And so in the Bronze Age and in the early Iron Age, if you had a possession of the king, particularly a concubine of the wife, and you marry her or have her, it's almost like you get all of that power. You get the power of the king, too. The king had this. Well, I have it now. Guess what? That makes me king. And so Abner and Ishbosheth were fighting over one of Saul's concubines, and there's going to be a massive rift. And Abner's like, that's it. I'm going with David. And that was the beginning of the end for Ishbosheth. He's going to be assassinated, and David's going to take over, in Jerusalem. And he's going to take over. Jerusalem was not, it was just kind of, as we saw in the multimedia presentation last Sunday, which we will hopefully finish, Jerusalem was the Jebusites had it. It wasn't really like a center where people were going, but David is going to make it a center of trade, but also a center of power within this area. He's going to rebuild Jerusalem. He's going to strengthen Jerusalem. He's going to build his own palace. And then he's going to say to Nathan, hey, I'd like to build God a house as well. Nathan's like, definitely, it's a great idea. But then he got the bad news saying, no, you're a man of war. A man of peace will build my house. All right, questions, comments? Let's remember, too, on this map, Moab. David was half Moabite through, not half, but he had He had Moabite blood in him through Ruth and Boaz. Okay, well, Boaz was a Hebrew, but Ruth was a Moabite. And we talked about this too. He sent his family to Moab when Saul was trying to chase them down for protection. All right, David, 30 years old. Okay, now 30 years old in the ancient world is kind of middle age. Right? You know, a lot of times people would, die of a lot of different things, disease and stuff like that, war. So, if you were like 40 years old and a warrior like David was, you were doing pretty good. Most of the time, you didn't reach 40 years old. So David did pretty well, avoiding death, early death. All right. Okay. We talked about this as well. David is going to capture the city of Jerusalem, the city of David. He's going to rename it the city of David. He makes it the new capital of Israel. David builds a palace and becomes greater because the Lord God Almighty was with him. So David is going, God is going to direct him. God is going to bless him as well. This is I'm sure that, God gave David through Nathan and others, good advice. David had a lot of wise people around him that gave him good advice. And that's a great lesson for us, right? Who's giving us advice in our life? Right? Who do we have? Who do we go to for, hey, should I do this, that, the other? Sometimes the only people we ask for advice is ourselves. Like we make all of those decisions. And I guess, you can have a pretty good run sometimes, but sometimes, you're the worst to get advice from, 100%. David brings the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. Remember, it was kind of sitting, I think, in Kirjath Jearim or something like that. I forget the name of the individual, but it was just kind of sitting there. So he wants to bring it to Jerusalem. Now, it didn't go well the first time. Remember, he put it on a cart, and, Uzziah tried to put his hand up to stop it as it tipped over, and he died. And the whole celebration was turned into mourning because, David kind of did things his own way and didn't show the proper respect to the ark. He didn't do it on purpose. He didn't follow it was supposed to be carried by the Levites. So eventually that is what happens. He comes in all joyful, dancing around in his loincloth, and just exuberant. You can understand that. Just think about where David was, like 10 years before this, and where he was now. Running from Saul, and now he's king in Jerusalem. He's bringing the Ark of the Covenant into his city. Pretty awesome. And so he's excited. He's dancing around. It was a time of celebration. But it says that, Michal despised him, right? Despised him in his heart. Like, what are you doing? You're debasing yourself. You're half naked dancing around. What are you doing? And so there's going to be a major rift between Michal and David, and that loving relationship is no more. David had no real relationship. It was really just a political marriage, unfortunately. And I think, brothers and sisters, that when David was on the run, Michal was given to another individual, Phanuel or something like that. He was given, and it sounds like that was really a nice match. They got along, they loved each other, and when David became powerful, one of the things that he wanted was he wanted Michal back. And it's this really sad scene where Michal has to go back to David, and Phanuel is kind of walking back, weeping, and your wife, who you love, is going back to her. It's all convoluted nonsense. So, sad. All right, here's a pretty good picture right here. I think this is from Rittmeyer. Rittmeyer put this together, I believe. So anyways, you can see the old city, which is down on the left-hand side. That's the original city of David. So not a massive place, but it's elevated. It's on an outcrop. It's walled. David is going to wall up these cities. He's going to go on a kind of a building spree. He's going to fortify Jerusalem, build towers, build walls, greater walls, gates, all that kind of stuff. You can see where Mount Zion, Mount Moriah is, right? And that's up top. And so eventually, the city is going to expand both up to the right, up to the top of Mount Zion, but also it's going to spread outwardly and down as well, to the point where you're going to have a new city and an old city, two distinct areas. You go to Jerusalem now, it's 1.2 million people live in it. So this is going to become a great city in this area. David's going to build it. It's actually going to be called the City of David. And his son Solomon is going to be even a greater builder than David. The thing with David was, brothers and sisters, even though he was told by God he couldn't build the temple because he was a man of war and had shed blood, that didn't prevent him from gathering all of the supplies that were going to be needed. Right? Not all of them, but the majority of the supplies, a lot of the gold, the silver, the wood, all that kind of stuff, precious stones. And he organized things on how to do all of the rituals of the temple as well. So he had a pretty sharp mind. And he had written all of this stuff down, and he had all of it, and he gave it to Solomon. He said, okay, you finish it. You do it. All the stuff is there to build, the foundation and everything. So, okay. Boom. All right. I think this is, let's see. Yeah, this is the last slide here. All right, so David is going to God is going to make a covenant with David. It's going to be a promise. It's going to be an agreement. And we are familiar with this, but it's an important one, right? The promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob pointed towards Christ. The covenant that was made to David as well, speaking about a king that would rule forever. Also made with David, prophecy of Christ. And we know that when the angel Gabriel appeared to Mary, she mentioned this. She mentioned the covenant. Well, the angel Gabriel mentioned it to Mary. David wants to build a temple for God. Prophet Nathan delivers God's promise. David's house and throne will last forever. This is going to be obviously fulfilled in Christ. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. And that was the covenant that was made, fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And so we have, in Judah, you had the house of David continuing on until it was destroyed by the Babylonians. So that's what? About 400 years. About 400 years the house of David lasted in a position of power. That's a pretty good run, right? United States is only 200 years old, right, as a country, a little over 200 years old. So 400 years, pretty good. Let's see. Yeah, so David is going to go on a big spree as far as battles are concerned. He takes out the Philistines. The Philistines were never a problem after David got through with them. And there were a few little things here and there, but they were never invading David's land ever. He made them almost vassals, right? Moabites as well, the Armenians and others. God gave them victory everywhere, even to a point where a massive coalition of Syrians came down, and Edomites, I think, I can't remember. And Joab had to divide his army because there were so many of them, and David won that great victory as well. So David's going to show kindness to Mephibosheth, who was Jonathan's son and Saul's grandson. It's another little political, I think, wise move on David's part. He's going to keep those connections with the house of Saul, Mephibosheth. He's going to be crippled. He was dropped, right? Another connection to Mount Gilboa, the destruction. They heard the news and they took off. They were, probably running away from the Philistine army. And he drops and he's crippled for whatever reason. You can see the love that David had for Jonathan as well, for Jonathan's sake. And he's going to restore some of Saul's land back to Mephibosheth. He's going to be pretty wealthy. Ziba as well is going to be a little friction between Ziba and Mephibosheth after Absalom takes control. We'll look at that next week. Absalom's going to take control, and Ziba says that Mephibosheth says that this is my opportunity to become king, and Mephibosheth is like, what are you talking about? This is a big rigmarole. Anyways, let's stop there. I like this picture right here. It's pretty good. It kind of gives you a sense of peace after all of the wars, all of the ups and downs. David has his city. He conquered Jerusalem, the city of David. He goes from a cave to a city, his own city, with walls, just a really strong, fortified city. and it's peaceful in there, and it's quiet. And he's finally found the peace that I think he was looking for, but it didn't last long because, as we're going to look, David had some time on his hands, and he was kind of looking out at Jerusalem, and he's going to be tempted by Bathsheba, and it's going to completely turn his life upside down. One small act of indiscretion is going to turn into an absolute Donnybrook of problems.